You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 6th of March 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
L'Europe de la défense, que nous défendons depuis 8 ans, devient donc une réalité.
France's President Macron tells the nation that Europe must be ready for a day when the US is no longer by its side. In a televised speech, Emmanuel Macron seeks to prepare France and Europe for a new era. We'll have more from Paris. Also ahead, one way or another, Donald Trump says he'll get Greenland. We'll examine what this means and how Denmark and its neighbours are responding with a heightened focus on defence. Also, the unstoppable rise of Saudi tourism.
The beauty about tourism is that it disseminates wealth to these authentic places. And I'm glad to see Saudi, with many of its villages, are now topping the lists of the best tourism villages in the world.
We'll hear more from the CEO of the Saudi Tourism Authority a little bit later, plus the papers and why soon you'll be able to enjoy a Louis Vuitton lipstick. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Donald Trump has issued what he called a last warning to Hamas to release the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. Mr. Trump has also ordered a pause in intelligence sharing with Ukraine as part of a suspension of military assistance to Kyiv. And Greece's centre-right government is facing a no-confidence vote this week over a deadly 2023 train disaster. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, last night, France's President Emmanuel Macron told his nation that Europe needs to be ready for the United States to no longer be by its side.
Et je veux croire que les États-Unis resteront à nos côtés. Mais il nous faut être prêts si tel n'était pas le cas. Que la paix en Ukraine soit acquise rapidement ou non, les États européens doivent, compte tenu de la menace russe que je viens de vous décrire, être capables de mieux se défendre et de dissuader toute nouvelle agression. Oui, quoi qu'il advienne, il nous faut nous équiper davantage.
That was the French President Emmanuel Macron saying that he wishes to believe that the United States will always be by its side, but we need to be ready, and EU or European states need to equip themselves early on, straight away, for any sense of any future Russian threat. Well, in a televised speech, Emmanuel Macron said that the world is entering a new era where peace cannot be guaranteed in Europe. Next week, he holds a meeting of European army chiefs in Paris. Today, European leaders gather in Brussels for more discussions on their next move. Well, to tell us more about this, I'm joined now by Monocle's Paris bureau chief, Simon Bouvier. Very good morning to Simon.
Bonjour, Emma.
So this was a real sense that there was an elevation of the stakes, wasn't there?
Absolutely. And I think that, as he mentioned in his speech, Macron has been pushing for integration, a European dimension to defense, to transform the EU and Europe from a kind of geopolitical minnow into a force that matches its economic firepower and integration. But he was a bit of a lonely voice among powerful countries until now. The big game changer that has been brought on by this essentially 180-degree turn by the United States is that Germany is now on board. Historically, the power couple of Europe has been in disagreement over whether European defense is a good idea. The Germans were not so enthusiastic about the idea, while the French were always pushing for it. Now, with the incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz, that's a different story. He has signaled that he thinks kind of moving away from dependence on the United States for security purposes is imperative.
This was a big departure, wasn't it? Because first and foremost, he was openly mentioning, the leader of one of the most powerful countries in Europe, that the United States may no longer be a totally trusted partner, without any direct reference to Donald Trump. But there was this sense now that Europe does need to step up, and it steps up in a way which is purely devoted to hard power.
Absolutely, and you need look no further than his explicit reference to France's nuclear arsenal and its nuclear dissuasion. I think, it's always been historically, since the end of World War II, in support of the larger American nuclear umbrella that was willingly provided to Europe to counter Soviet influence. And now he's saying, don't worry, the French nuclear umbrella, we need to discuss expanding the French nuclear umbrella to the rest of Europe because France's national interest is also the European interest and vice versa. And there's a lot of controversy in France, or there was until his speech, around what exactly this would mean. He did specify that the French president and the French president alone would be the person with their finger on the button, and so that France would keep that prerogative for itself and not share it with the EU or other European countries. But just the fact that he felt he had to mention that we may need to discuss a kind of European nuclear dissuasion option. It tells you all you need to know about how dire the situation is from a security standpoint and how much of a seismic shift this is.
Indeed. I mean, there's a very much the sense that Europe needs to reduce its reliance on elsewhere. And this is being borne out by yet another meeting of European leaders today in Brussels, where they will be talking about exactly what you've mentioned, how Europe responds. The fact is that it is having to deal with a White House which is changing direction and moving very, very, very quickly. We've already seen the suspension of military help to Ukraine in the last 12 hours. We've had the announcement intelligence sharing will be removed between the United States and Ukraine. And we have Volodymyr Zelensky in the middle of this, flying in to this meeting, don't we?
Absolutely, and there are also reports, Emma, that Washington is essentially feeling out opposition leaders in Ukraine to see if anybody is ready and willing to step in if they figure out a way to get him to step down, Zelensky, I mean. So really, the shift in U.S. policy, it's not just isolationist. It really is taking Russia's side at the moment and pursuing actively what have been Russian objectives for a while. It's not just you Europeans are on your own to deal with this now. It is they are working against what Europe has been trying to achieve since this war broke out. And so I think this meeting of the European Council, I mean, it's yet another meeting that EU and all of its different branches and institutions are well known for convening and talking. And because it is necessary for all 27 members to be in agreement over anything, it's very difficult to take decisive action. But I think it really is a moment where they're going to have to get it together. And you could see that Macron already anticipated that one obstacle might be objections to any kind of strong action from Viktor Orban, who historically has been pro-Russian. He invited him to the Élysée Palace last night after his speech to talk ahead of this summit. I think probably the tenor of the discussion was, what do you want to support an active effort on the part of the European Union to step up its defense plans?
Indeed, because Orban is one of the sticking points in this moment that Europe finds itself in, and Europe has to decide very, very quickly two things, doesn't it? Firstly, what does it want to do? You talk about the fact that they talk an awful lot, but nothing seems to happen. But also, not do we want to do, but also how are we going to pay for it? Because we're going to get the likes of Italy and Spain wanting more money from the defence strategy. How much do you think that Macron is playing a key role in this? I mean, the fact that he takes Viktor Orban to one side the night before the big meeting.
I think he really wants to play a critical role. I think structurally, France being the only member of the European Union left with nuclear weapons, with, even if you include the UK, which is still, despite Brexit, France's kind of closest military partner in Europe, their arsenal is not as developed and versatile as France's. So de facto, France is going to have a key role in any kind of security discussion that relates to Europe. But I think it's also something that is dear to his heart and has been forever. He has been in favor, again, of integration of European defense since he came onto the political scene back in 2017. And he knows that without support and without him pushing, it's going to be difficult to get anything done. But I think he's also hopeful that he could keep the United States on side to a degree if he can show, look, we are really getting things done here. We have plans for a European peacekeeping force. We have a specific detailed plan on how we're going to take over all of the kind of security functions that you've been playing so far. You can benefit through this minerals deal. You can benefit through selling weapons, not just to Ukraine, but to European countries as well. So please stay in the fold and don't actively pursue Russian interests here. So he will play a key role. And I think this is a sidebar, but he's probably also delighted to be back in the spotlight and in a position of influence after having been completely sidelined from domestic French politics, for sure.
Monocle's Paris Bureau Chief Simon Bouvier, thank you so much for joining us on the line. You're listening to The Globalist.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
7:13 here in London, 5:13 a.m. in Nuuk. Well, buried in the 100-minute marathon speech given by Donald Trump on Tuesday night to Congress was a reiteration that he wants Greenland for the United States.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
What one way or another means is not clear, but it's understandably caught people's attention in both Greenland, in Denmark and across the wider region as well. So to tell us more, I'm joined from Malmö by the journalist Ilgin Karladag and from Stockholm by Bruno Kaufmann, global democracy correspondent at the Swiss Broadcasting Company. A very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Ilgin, if we can begin with you, and what's been the reaction to this seemingly off-the-cuff remark, but it's a repeat of a previous desire?
Exactly. In recent weeks, Trump has focused on Ukraine and trade wars with Canada, but mentioning Greenland in his speech to Congress, that sends a very strong signal that he won't let go of his plans to take control of Greenland. And in his speech, when he said one way or the other, in the video, we can see members of the Congress laughing. You could hear laughter. And the Greenlandic reaction to that has been quite upsetting. Erik Jensen, who's a social democratic party leader, he said, the audience laughing when he said he would get Greenland, he said, this confirms that there's no respect for us. Their behavior is very, very worrying. And the Prime Minister of Greenland, he also once again had to repeat that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders. And he said, we don't want to be Americans. We don't want to be Danish. We are Greenlandic. And the Americans, they have to understand that.
Bruno, just develop this idea of the laughter at the end of the comment for us, if you wouldn't mind. The fact remained is that there is that trope, isn't there, that big countries, well, sort of big leaders like Donald Trump, indeed, let's make comparisons with Vladimir Putin, they like to bully smaller countries, don't they? And this is a prime example of it.
Yes, of course. I mean, Greenlanders are very sensitive to this kind of foreign influence and foreign opinions about them. I mean, they have in recent decades struggled with the post-colonial heritage of the Danish powers. And now a new neighbor in the West, the US, is starting to behave in the same way. So, of course, especially now with a few days to go to the national elections on Tuesday, this kind of reaction really creates a feeling in Greenland that they have to stand up for their own case, for their own country. So it's no surprise that nobody is happy with this new talk in Washington about taking Greenland.
Coming back to you, Ilgin, let's talk about the reaction of the Danes. We have recent large investments in the Danish military, which has been prompted by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We also have Denmark picking a Norwegian ammunition maker to start up a shuttered ammunitions plant to make ammunition locally and quickly. Is there a sense in the region that it is having to respond perhaps by itself to ensure that it doesn't or must not rely on others as much as it has done in the past to make sure it stays secure?
Well, the US has historically been a great ally of Denmark, and that is now changing, and that is quite worrying. And Denmark, of course, has to deal with this for the next 4 years, and that's what the debate has been in, especially the Danish media, is that Trump is not, he's very serious, and he's coming for Greenland basically, and Denmark has to prepare for this. But another thing to mention here is that even if Trump forces for independence, if he forces for a referendum in Greenland, Denmark has to agree. The Danish parliament has to agree on holding a referendum. And that's what the debate is about as well. And one thing that needs to be mentioned as well is the 45-minute conversation that Trump had with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. And initially, not much was said about that conversation, except that Denmark reiterated that they contribute to U.S. jobs. But then after that, details emerged that it was actually quite a horrific conversation, and she had to immediately prepare and reach out to her European allies.
And Bruno, this sense that Denmark is absolutely stuck here with Mette Frederiksen having to field conversations with Donald Trump, which aren't productive, aren't positive. At the same time, the message that's come out from Donald Trump is difficult, isn't it? Because we've already mentioned the fact that he says one way or another we're going to get Greenland, but he's also given a message out to Greenland saying we strongly support your right to determine your own future. And this is something this is a very delicate path that the Danes have had to tread, isn't it? Because they've had to try to frame this appeal to the island's inhabitants as a positive thing.
That's right. I mean, Denmark has really, in the last years, especially the current Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, been much more soft on Greenlandic wish of independence and self-determination. Mette Frederiksen has understood that Denmark can't continue to be the old colonial power there in the Arctic, but there are certain interests. So what it's now about, I mean, since 2009, Greenland has the right to declare independence and to have a referendum. Of course, the Danish parliament has still to say yes to it, but it's not really the right of the Danes to say stop to that. So in this moment, this kind of invitation by the Americans brings Denmark in a difficult situation, but also Greenland, because Greenland Greenland really wants to be its own country. And what the big challenge for Greenland is, it's a very big country with a very small population and an economy which is highly dependent on other forces when it comes to fishery, about Europe, when it comes to security, about the US. So what Greenland likes to do is a better balance between the East and the West, and to be its own. And what the election will be on Tuesday is about which kind of step forward will Greenland take. And my expectation is that the parties in the middle, which wants to have a balanced way to independence, will win this election.
And Bruno Kaufmann in Stockholm, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks also to Ilgin Kalidag on the line from Malmö. Still to come on today's Globalist.
With its blend of Japanese spirit, innovation and user-centric design, the E10 Shinkansen is poised to redefine high-speed rail travel for decades to come.
Find out why Japan's bullet train is heading abroad when it comes to the design of its next model. Stay with us. It's 7:21 here in London. Let's continue now with today's newspapers. Joining me in the studio is the author and political journalist Terry Stiasny. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning.
How's life with you?
It's all going all on an even keel, I think, at the moment. Yes.
Unlike everything else.
Unlike everything else. No, I know. Looking through, I mean, it's all of a piece this morning, isn't it? I mean, just looking through some of the UK news headlines this morning. Daily Telegraph says Trump turns off Ukraine missiles. The Guardian says US stops sharing intelligence with Kiev to pile pressure on Zelensky. The Times says more people will die after US cuts, says Ukraine MP. So, all these things that you've already been discussing are very big in the newspapers. And in particular, I think given that there is this special European Council meeting on defence today, and that the British Defence Secretary John Healey is heading to Washington to talk to Pete Hegseth, people are really trying to dive into a bit more, what can Europe do in terms of its own defence? And there's one article here in The Guardian which looks at this, for instance, saying there could be something called a sky shield, the idea of having a European air force of 120 fighter jets, which would be potentially deployed to secure the skies over Kiev and over Western Ukraine. So they're all really, everybody's trying to think, well, if America is no longer to be relied on, what is it that we do next?
And the papers are doing, I think we spoke a little bit earlier on the programme with Simon Bouvier in Paris, who's explaining that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has been talking for so long about an integration of a European military defence, a European peacekeeping force. And, he can probably at this point sort of claim a slight victory here, saying, look, I told you so, but I told you so. And because what we're seeing from the way that the papers are dealing with it is that they're all looking at what each country can do, how everybody can sort of like look in their stock cupboard and say, right, what can I now contribute to this more concerted and unified response?
Yes, and you get the sense that there are, plans that people have perhaps been trying to push for a while, that, they've met with resistance somehow. And so, so if there are people putting forward this Sky Shield plan, people like Gabrielis Landsbergis, former Lithuanian foreign minister, former US generals, former British army generals, all of these people, and, Polish president saying, look, we've got this plan. This is how Europe could step up. And they, it says here, they've been discussing this without making progress since February 2022, since the Russian invasion. And now, all of these things suddenly seem a lot more urgent. But then also, you realise how much Europe does rely on the United States. So, for instance, the Times is reporting here about the UK's nuclear deterrent, the Trident missiles, and basically explaining that, imagining what if the US suddenly turned off effectively the UK's nuclear deterrent, which they can't do in quite the same way, but basically saying some of these missiles are out at sea on submarines. Other ones are sitting in Georgia in the United States, where they are kept when they're not being used. They essentially rely on the US for sort of for refurbishment, for parts, for maintenance, for all sorts of other technological support. And, the RUSI, Director of Military Sciences, which is a defence think tank, saying if the US cut off support, we would have a load of Trident missiles in reserve. But at some point, we would need to fashion our own missiles with somebody, and saying, well, this is potentially where you might have to, say, talk to France about this in the way that Macron has been suggesting.
Indeed. I mean, the article in the Times makes a very good point that the missiles that the British use are designed by the US company Lockheed Martin. And companies like Lockheed Martin have are so integrated into the global defence system that, the likes of BAE Systems is not going to have the time or indeed the capacity to step up.
Yes, and I think that's going to be the difficulty for Europe. For all you can say, we're putting loads of money into this, we're going to put loads of R&D into this. These kind of projects, these kind of defence projects are hugely expensive and they all take a while. So you can't suddenly go, right, they might know how to do these things, but how long is it actually going to take to get something that is actually up and running?
Let's talk about how, let's move away and move to another deeply sort of like concerning moving story, which is about Gaza at the moment. And we've had Donald Trump issuing a sort of final ultimatum to Hamas saying you must hand over your hostages to Israel straight away or face the consequences. That's a serious, straightforward threat. But what we do have is sort of more light-hearted, if that is possible, approaches to the crisis, which are going very, very wrong.
Well, yes, this is sort of in the category of things stories you think may be funny at first glance and turn out not to be. But this, I think it's a really interesting point about AI and news. So you will probably remember the AI video about a future Gaza, which Donald Trump posted on his social media, complete with him and Netanyahu sitting on the beach, the strange belly dancers who had beards, a big gold statue of Donald Trump. And the Guardian has spoken to the person who created this video, who is now saying that it wasn't designed for. It was an LA-based filmmaker who said he made this AI video and he never intended it to be serious. It was supposed to be a satire, and he said he was experimenting with this and created this video and was, in his words, horrified to wake up and find out that this had been shared by Donald Trump. Now, it's a bit, so he said he did share an early version of it with Mel Gibson, but then Mel Gibson has denied that he was the person who then showed this to Donald Trump and it was shared. But, this video designer, he's saying that he worries for him how fake news spreads. And I think it's just be very careful what you create is the message of this. If you did intend it as a satire, you have no control over, how other people used it, because Donald Trump seems to have shared it in sort of as a genuine idea of what potentially Gaza might be like in the future.
There is also this added level that very, very quickly since Donald Trump has come into the White House, the sort of the hyper-real element of governing and TV show and extreme ideas, which ordinarily you would consider to be satire, such as, Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump floating around on inflatables, drinking nice drinks, is now actually something that we're all second guessing. Actually, is this real? Is this right?
Yes, I think with this case, obviously we know it wasn't real in a sense. We know, that's clearly, not what Gaza looks like and not what it's likely to look like at any time in the future. But was it a real idea of what somebody would like it to be? So yes, when you watch this one, you can tell that it's AI very easily. But there are other things that might be put out into circulation where it's not so easy to tell, and that is, of course, one of the dangers of AI is that it kind of takes on a life of its own.
And whether Donald Trump believes it actually understands what satire is. Finally, let's have a quick look at something which isn't majorly conflict related. It's just slightly odd. We head back to Paris. But we have some bright spark who decided to chuck a snowball from a ski lift onto someone having his lunch in the Alps, and he may well pay quite a hefty price for it.
Well, yes, I first looked at this story and I thought, well, that's excessive. A Parisian man is now facing a lawsuit. He's facing potential jail time, investigation for assault because he threw a snowball off a ski lift, which landed on the head of a 61-year-old man who was slightly apparently, I think his glasses were broken. He wasn't seriously injured. But when you look at the video, which was posted by somebody going, "Ha, look at me, aren't I funny?" And you see the piece of snow that he is throwing from a chairlift, and it is, I'm sort of holding my hands out at kind
about
of
the size of a
distance
basketball,
apart.
isn't it?
It's like a sort of the size of a small toddler, pretty much, sitting on his lap. This large lump of snow, which the man then picks up in his gloved hands and throws quite fast onto a terrace full of people eating their lunch, and they were filming it for, to get clicks on social media. But somebody luckily, the man has only suffered minor injuries and his glasses were broken. He's filed a lawsuit. But that was quite a heavy piece of snow, and throwing that from a great height, you could really injure somebody quite badly. So is this another example of people just doing things to get sort of clicks on social media, which actually they think it's funny and really isn't. So I think I've decided I've come down on the side of the French investigators on this one. Do not be a complete idiot and then post about it, telling everyone how clever you think you are.
Law Enforcer Terrace Diasny, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. The time here in London, 7:30 a.m. You're listening to The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A quick summary now of the latest news headlines. Donald Trump has issued what he's called a last warning to Hamas to release the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. It follows confirmation that Washington has been in direct contact with Hamas in recent weeks, a move which has reportedly angered Israel. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has ordered a pause in intelligence sharing with Ukraine. It's part of a suspension of military assistance to Kyiv. It's a move that could seriously affect Ukraine's ability to target Russian forces and to defend itself. And Greece's centre-right government is facing a no-confidence vote this week over a deadly train disaster. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets last week to mark the second anniversary of the country's worst rail crash, in which 57 people, most of them students, were killed. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Let's take a look now at another story we're following today. Monocle's Tokyo Bureau Chief and Senior Asia Editor Fiona Wilson tells us why, for the first time, a non-Japanese studio is to design a bullet train in Japan.
Since its launch in 1964, the high-speed bullet train, or Shinkansen, has been in the hands of a succession of Japanese designers, such as Eiji Mitoka and Ken Okuyama. But now, for the first time, a non-Japanese designer has taken on the challenge. East Japan Railway this week revealed the first images of its new generation E10 Tohoku Shinkansen, whose exterior livery and interiors are the work of the London design consultancy Tangerine. The mid-green exterior is inspired by the northerly mountain forests and coastlines that the train will serve, while the interior has more luggage space, more power outlets, and dedicated seats with partitions for those who wish to work. It also has the latest earthquake resistance engineering and a top speed of 320 kilometres per hour. Matt Round, the chief creative officer at Tangerine, said, "With its blend of Japanese spirit, innovation and user-centric design, the E10 Shinkansen is poised to redefine high-speed rail travel for decades to come." The only drawback for eager passengers is that they will have to wait a while to try the E10. The trains are expected to go into service in 2030.
My thanks to Fiona Wilson for that. For more from Monocle's editors and correspondents, simply sign up for a free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. We head now to New Zealand because the government has said too many traffic cones are slowing down roads and the economy. Officials have promised a crackdown, calling the cones unnecessary and frustrating for drivers. Critics, however, say the cones keep people safe. But in places like Queenstown, now nicknamed Conestown, locals say the situation is out of control, with cones appearing on sculptures, yachts and even cranes. Well, a government report found 145 out of 800 work sites have unneeded traffic controls. And to tell us more, I'm joined by Mike Cherney, who's a reporter from the Wall Street Journal in Sydney. Good morning, Mike.
Hi, good morning. Good to be here.
Good to have you with us. This sounds rather preposterous, were it not true.
Yeah, I kind of found out about this debate just reading some of the local media, and it's pretty wild.
So just explain to us, we've painted a small picture of what is going on, but the fact remains is that there are so many traffic cones, especially in Queenstown/Conestown, that actually it's slowing down business. What is this like?
Yeah, I mean that was something that people have said. It might be kind of hard to prove quantitatively, but yeah, I talked to a guy in the story there who does Segway tours, and he sees cones all the time. I think there's a photo of him in the story, kind of weaving around the cones. But the cones are supposed to slow down traffic. That's kind of their job. So. Kind of depends who you talk to. You get pro-cone and anti-cone views.
Now we have, in your article that you've written for the Wall Street Journal, you're talking to local people who are, well, there are two people, aren't they? We have brewers, local workers. We have the people who are actually putting the cones out to make sure that the town stays safe. But we also have lawmakers who are kind of stuck in the middle of this, aren't we?
Definitely, it became a little bit of a political hot potato in New Zealand. You had the government, which is a sort of right-leaning conservative government, saying there was maybe too many cones, and then you had the left-wing opposition saying that this whole debate around the cones was just a distraction. That the government wanted to just show that it was doing something, I guess, relatively easy. Versus tackling, very serious issues like cost of living and stuff. There's definitely a lively debate, and I think it's gone on for a few years, and it might continue on in the future as well.
And indeed, the fact remains is it has its amusing elements to it, and we've seen in Auckland, the mayor throwing cones in a bin, and people joking that no one wins when lemonade stands require road cones. But this is costing the government an awful lot of money because cones don't come cheap, do they?
No, there is a cost. The government did put out a report that said over 3 fiscal years they had spent, I think it was 786 million New Zealand dollars. That's not just cones. That's on sort of traffic management overall. So there is a cost, but and it can be amusing, especially when the mayor puts out a video, throwing cones in a dumpster. But it is a serious issue. There are people working on the roads that the cones are protecting. I mean, the cones are supposed to protect drivers as well. And you definitely had a few organizations put out some statements, saying that it is a little bit of a joke, but also it is a serious issue, and they were concerned that the cones would be maybe overly trivialized. So. It was quite an interesting topic to explore.
So just tell us what the result of this is going to be. Are there going to be fewer cones, and have cones basically lost their authority in New Zealand?
Well, the government says that there should be fewer cones. They're rolling out what they described as a new risk-based approach to how many cones you're supposed to put out there, and I think the idea is that the workers and the contractors will perhaps have a little bit more say over how many cones go where. But I think we'll have to see if indeed there will be fewer cones. I actually got an email from a reader who said they were recently in New Zealand, and they say they saw lots of cones and not a lot of work. So we'll have to see if the government can succeed in this mission.
Mike Cherney in Sydney, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Now this week, the world's travel tastemakers have descended on Berlin as the German capital plays host to the Internationale Tourismusbörse, or ITB Berlin, the industry's leading trade fair. Well, this year's edition started strong. It was fully booked and featured a record 5,800 exhibitors from more than 170 countries. Well, one country hoping to leave its mark is Saudi Arabia. It's taken over a bustling hall to display everything from new hotels, regenerative tourism in the Red Sea, heritage preservation and much more. Well, earlier, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent Carlotta Ribello caught up with Fahd Hamiduddin, the CEO of the Saudi Tourism Authority. Carlotta began by asking him about Saudi Arabia's strategic geographic position in the world and its ambitions to act as a global hub.
You know, if you go back thousands of years, you will see that this land has been connecting a global connector. Many civilizations passed through this land, from prophets to traders to civilizations like the Nabateans. So this has been a connector. Why? Because it sits at the center of if you look at the world map, that's where it sits. So today you see the Western civilization, you see the Eastern civilization, and with Arabian civilization now being unpacked to the world, there is a lot to offer. Now that's historically. In today's world, we are investing in tourism more than any other country in the world. And with that comes investing in aviation. Not a single country has a pipeline of aircrafts to be received in the coming 3 years like Saudi Arabia. So we started a few years ago with 120 cities connected to Saudi around the world. As we speak, we're connected to 170, if not more, and we will continue connecting 250 by 2030. So we reckon that we need to reduce the cost and effort of travel and reaching our destination. And we've had some great wins. And we're doing it with partners. Just last year, more than 30 destinations in Europe connected to Saudi.
I want to stay on that point of investment because we keep coming back to it. And it seems like it's an interesting time for this to be happening because a lot of countries, a lot of cities, when they invest heavily in tourism, it's almost like a reaction. The big visitor numbers are there. They need to address it because it's bursting at the seams. Here you almost have the other way around, which is the opportunity to build right from the beginning. That difference in approach to investment, has it been the key to preserve heritage, to honor culture as you've been describing?
There is a saying that says, build it and they will come. Now, this has succeeded in many places of the world, not probably everywhere. In tourism, if you look at the tourism expected growth by UN Tourism or World Travel and Tourism Council, all the projections are basically saying tourism will grow at a pace that is higher than the growth of global GDP and global economy. So it's going to be one of those sectors that will continue lifting the global growth. You see more and more people owning passports, more and more low-cost carriers coming. So the projections of growth in travel and tourism is exponential. All the indicators are telling you this is a sector that is destined to grow. Now, that's on financial numbers, but look at how much good this sector brings. Forget the financial good or the economic good. Look at how much jobs it creates. Look at how many SMEs of those jobs are being created. Look at the good of preserving or disseminating wealth to rural areas. You know, the creative and curious and cultural travelers, and I think the sophisticated and luxury travelers too, are all looking for what's authentic. Going to the usual cities may not give you that best experience. You will see more of the cookie cutters everywhere. So the beauty about tourism is that it disseminates wealth to these authentic places. And I'm glad to see Saudi, with many of its villages, are now topping the lists of the best tourism villages in the world. So not only the Saudi cities, but also the Saudi villages are now welcoming people. So whether it's creating economic growth or creating livelihood for people in remote areas, small, medium mom and pop shops and SMEs and entrepreneurs, it's the fuel for entrepreneurs as well. It's a consumer market that is moving and curious to explore and be inspired. Phenomenal opportunity for entrepreneurs. Lastly, I would say, is that every traveler is an agent of good, specifically leisure travelers. Whether they know it or not, when we travel for leisure, we travel with our hearts in our hands, going to look at what's beautiful in the place, in the space, in the people we meet. And whether we like it or not, consciously or not, we go back and tell these stories. Every story builds a bridge, and we need this in today's world more than any other time. And there's so much to unite us than divide us in a time where we see polarization spreading around the world. With everything I said, give me one reason why not to invest big and make it, for a country like us, the largest bet to take over from oil. People used to come to Saudi for oil, they will be coming for tourism.
The flip coin of tourism, the good that it does to the country itself. Tell me a bit more about your thoughts on that, about how tourism can be a catalyst for positive urban change in Saudi cities.
If you look at what tourism is being attacked by in today's world, over-tourism, and that's where tourists and residents meet. And where do they do? It's in urban spaces. So is it a problem of tourism or is it a problem of urban planning? I think it's the latter for sure. We must learn from these mature destinations not to fall in the trap of others. And if we do, the world would be unforgiving. Residents before tourists. The second thing is, whatever we do that is new, like the leisure projects or the Red Sea, these are architectural marvels that are shaping the urban space of these new destinations to a standard that is never done. And what I mean by standard, I don't mean luxury in its commercial tense. I think luxury in modern world is authenticity. It's relevant to the place and creation of space that allows interaction and preserving or regenerating the old.
Was Fahd Hamiduddin, the CEO of the Saudi Tourism Authority, talking to Carlotta Rabella at ITB in Berlin. You're with The Globalist.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
Time now to talk art and culture with Emma Rose Abrams, arts journalist, I'm delighted to say, is in the studio. Good morning, Emma Rose.
Good morning.
How's life?
Life is good.
Good.
Yeah.
And even better if you're a fan of Renaissance sculpture.
I know, because they found a Donatello.
Just found a Donatello. Who is they and where did they find it?
They are a museum, a local museum, the Spiš Museum in Levoča in Slovakia. And they have found one of only 8 signed works by Donatello. And it's this kind of beautiful bust that they found. And it depicts the kind of Italian noblewoman, Cecilia Gonzaga. And but the interesting thing is that they've had this in the collection since the 17th century. And they haven't noticed, or it fell out of knowledge. So they didn't realise they had it, which is kind of strange.
Yes, because it begs a couple of questions. Firstly, have they got so much stuff that you in the back of the house, you forget what you've got, and then you look at it and there's this glorious rediscovery. But also, how long had they not had it? Did they not realise that it was there? Because if they were able to see it, then surely, by all intents and purposes, I mean, having looked at the pictures, you can tell straight away that this is something rather special.
Yeah, but it seems the answer is we don't remember. Because it belonged to a grand family, and they turned the stately home that they lived in into a school. And there are anecdotes about people putting eyeliner on that sculpture and rolling it around like a ball.
Which is marvellous, and it's still survived.
Yes,
it's
here.
Still beautiful.
Yes.
And this marvellous amount of neglect now, obviously, perhaps we'll be treating the Donatello with a little bit more tenderness.
I think
it's caused problems for the people at the museum, hasn't it?
They are no longer in post.
Whoops.
Yeah. Okay. And I think they're going to sell the sculpture, which is a little sad, but maybe for the best.
Where does it? So yes, what happens now to it? It goes to Private World.
Yeah, Private World. I think they're just going to sell it. And there's general concern in the kind of museum world that about the entire collection.
What, in Slovakia?
Well, yeah, and abroad, I think they're a bit concerned as to how they're treating the artworks.
Indeed, and there's also that question now that, given the sort of the rarity of something like a Donatello bust, if it were to go into the private world, would there be any sense that the rest of the world would ever see it again? Because there is that, one wonders if there's this sort of overarching body which says that something is so important that it cannot be kept behind closed doors.
Absolutely, and I know Italy are quite good at retrieving such works and bringing them back to Italy. So I feel like if it was in a private collection in Italy, then we might see it. But if it goes elsewhere, perhaps not. And I mean, shows of Donatello's work are rare. So for it to come out and be lent,
from buy, whoever buys it, would also be a very rare occurrence, I think. I don't know if it would happen, in the next 20 years or something like that. So I hope that someone steps in and does the good thing, buys it, and then gives it to a museum or puts it on view.
Let's go to the absolute opposite end of the scale in terms of what constitutes art. So you have a bust done by Donatello, hand-sculpted, out of marble, has taken a long time, is an absolute masterpiece. Then we now have Christie's running an AI auction.
Yeah. We have Christie's running an AI auction, and it's got on everybody's nerves. They've done one before, and then there was the quite controversial sale of the work by Ida, the robot, at Sotheby's, and then now this. And I think because the works in the show have been made using models that take inspiration or take information, data from models that, they don't use or respect copyright when they retrieve the data that they use to make these images. About artists are signing an open letter saying they want the auction to be cancelled. It features some quite famous artists like Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, who had a recent show at the Serpentine, Refik Anadol, who's one of the most famous AI artists. There's some big names in there, and there's only 34 works in the auction that I've seen online. But it's causing a big hoo-ha, and I think people are using it perhaps as an opportunity to call out these models that don't respect copyright, but also draw attention to the fact that these works aren't perhaps original.
Indeed, I mean, to what degree are they considered to be original? And also, they have by their very nature to be derivative.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it really depends on the artist. When you've got artists that are using AI to reinterpret their own ideas. So with Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, they had a work at the Serpentine, which was you would sing into a microphone and then it would sing back to you immediately, kind of reinterpreting that data. But there's a huge variety of works in the show. There's work that looks like on oil painting, and you've got to say that's being taken from other oil paintings, the information used to make that. So I think it's difficult to pin down just because of the huge variety of work that can be made using AI.
Finally, a quick look at a small cafe in Dalston, which has managed to find itself at the cultural heart of everything.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. So Daniel Bloomberg won his Oscar for the score of The Brutalist. Well done him. But he shouted out the wonderful Cafe Otto in Dalston, which is this hub of alternative music and just a wonderful cafe where you can sit and work or, have coffee, lunch during the day. And he really made a huge point of shouting out the cafe during his speech. Like a big part of the speech was for the cafe, where that kind of given him work and helped showcase his art as well.
Emma Rose Abrams, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Finally, on today's programme, not content with clothes and accessories plus a future foray into hospitality, luxury's biggest brand by revenue at least is moving into makeup. From this autumn, you'll be able to buy one of 55 shades of Louis Vuitton lipstick, plus lip balms and eyeshadows. And the legendary makeup artist Pat McGrath will be having creative control. Well, joining me now is the Woman House Luxury Markets Editor, Creative Control, Brenda Toohey. Good morning, Brenda.
Good morning. That's Dame Pat McGrath to you.
It is, and Dame Brenda Toohey from You Shall Henceforth Be Known. And thank goodness Pat McGrath has got the hand on the steering wheel of this.
Absolutely. I mean, she is fantastic. What she doesn't know about color, nobody knows. She's going to have 55 different shades of lipstick, something for everybody. I think in the future, going down the road, they're going to roll out some foundations and maybe some skincare. But right now, they're just sticking to color palettes, and I can't wait to see them.
I know, because if Pat McGrath's got a hand on it, it'll be fine.
And the lipsticks and the eyeshadow palettes are going to be housed in little, I think, leather pouches.
Little trunks.
Yeah, I know. Don't you love that?
That's it. So that's it. This is the silly thing. Because when I read this, I was like, oh, good. We've got another foray of a luxury brand departing from accessories and blah, blah, blah. And then they said they're coming in tiny trunks.
I know. I mean, I want that. I can't wait to see it.
Clearing out the cabinet.
Absolutely. I mean, Hermès has the little, linen pouches for their kind of Piet Mondrian-inspired range of lipsticks. But Louis Vuitton with the old LV.
Tiny trunks.
Ooh, logo trunks. Can't wait.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more seriously about this. Well, the 55 Shades is the LV, isn't it?
It is.
It's the 50 and the 5 in Roman numerals, which is very stylish and very lovely. But what is this in response to? I mean, is this a sort of a brand new creative step up, or is this possibly a rather tacit and stylish recognition of the fact that there is a fall away of the high-end luxury customer here, and that they need to start to target a market which can enjoy that affordable luxury?
I think there is a softening, certainly, of the luxury market. It's an entry-level issue, I think. It's another entry level on which younger people can come and join the Louis Vuitton family. And, in a lovely way. It's lovely to have something gorgeous in your handbag. If you can't afford a Louis Vuitton handbag for £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, perhaps you can afford a lipstick, which might be in the range of £60 to £80.
And the little trunk. This is going to be an interesting moment for Louis Vuitton, given the fact that this is already a very, very crowded market, isn't it? I mean, if we just look at the likes of, for a long time we've had Chanel, Dior, Armani, Yves Saint Laurent, beauty, and they have all sort of become incredibly, dare I say it, mainstream. But we've just seen a sort of a stepping up of new players recently when it comes to cosmetics, Prada, Celine, all that. Where does Louis Vuitton want to sit, given the fact that, there is an awful lot of choice out there? And the first question you ask is, why do I need another lipstick?
There is a lot of choice out there, but I think what separates Louis Vuitton from a lot of the other brands is distribution. They sell their products in their own stores. So in 2016, they launched their perfume. We thought, who needs another perfume? But their perfumes are exquisite. The bottles were designed by Mark Newson, and they sit beautifully aligned in their own stores. So they don't have the distribution costs, which means that other brands have, selling them through Sephora or Selfridges or whoever. So they can spend maybe a little bit more on the ingredients, rarer ingredients, more refined. And I would imagine it'll be the same with the makeup.
And it is, finally, a good idea. It's a good example of a brand which is retaining its integrity and its brand integrity, given the fact that we're seeing so much changeover and so much churn and brands trying to reinvent themselves every 5 minutes. There is this sort of constant brand sort of solidity when it comes to LVMH.
And it's an extension of the brand, too. I mean, we see it with Dries van Noten and their kind of wonderfully mismatched lipstick packaging and perfume packaging, with the Delph and chintz, and it's really, really wonderful. And who doesn't like to have something beautiful in their bathroom or on their dresser in their bedroom?
And I suspect we're going to be front in the queue, aren't we? Brenda Toohey, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to our producers, Laura Kramer, Hassan Anderson, Monica Lillis and Ryuma Takashaki. And our researcher was Francesca Jilks, and our studio manager was Lily Austin, with editing assistance from Hunter Wang. After the headlines, more music on the way. Chris Chermak is here with a briefing at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.